Welcome to another episode of Bright Ideas. I am the host, Jessica Duemig. It's great to have you back with us, and I am excited to introduce you guys, if you don't already know him, to Scottie Rodgers. Hi, Scottie. How's it going?
Good. How you doing?
I am doing fantastic, even better now that I'm talking to you face to face, which we'll get into this in a little bit, but we have never done via computer, not face to face. So we'll get into that in a second. But before we jump into that, I would love to have you introduce yourself and talk to us a little bit about your background in sports.
I'm fortunate enough to be in my 30th year of sports full time. My name is Scottie Rodgers, Vice President of Communications for the Goodyear Cotton Bowl Classic, which is the college football playoff bowl games that happens in AT&T Stadium in lovely Arlington, Texas. And in this 30-year run that I've had, and it's been quite a journey. I'm in my fifth year here with the Cotton Bowl Classic, but I've had a lot of stops, three Division I conference offices, Tulane University, what was CSTV, what is now CBS Sports Network and CBS Interactive, the NCAA National Office in Indianapolis. I went to school at the University of Alabama, and that's where it really all got started for me. As an undergrad, I was able to work in the athletic communications office there for 3 years as a student, and it was really that foundation that springboarded me into this career. And it's been a fun journey. I've met a lot of great people like yourself, and I can't. Sometimes I still pinch myself to think that I'm still doing this as a job all these years later.
All these years later, true, but how did you actually decide when you were at Alabama, hey, I want to work in sports?
Well, I'll try to give you the very short version. The shortest version I can give you, I got into writing sports in high school, kind of haphazardly, just because it was an opportunity that was thrust to me. That turned into me going into a what used to be called the minority journalism workshop, which is basic journalism camp, that they had at Alabama. And this was after my senior year of high school, before my freshman year, and I went to this camp. And it was a 2 week deal, and we put together a paper, and you wrote stories, and you designed and did all the things. Somehow, some way, I got voted the best story of the workshop. And ironically enough, about 2 or 3 weeks after, I was going back to Alabama for freshman orientation, because I was going to school there. And I was going to major in computer science and math, but because I had the success in the workshop, I decided to. I never formally declared my major or minor in those, but so when I went back, I formally declared to have a major in journalism and a minor in computer science. The computer science thing never happened. I ended up minoring in history, but I went there, and my first semester I wrote for the student paper, the Crimson White, wrote sports. Second semester, I did not write because I was pledging a fraternity, so I was kind of had too much on my plate. But the summer between my freshman and sophomore year, I went back home to my hometown in Atmore, Alabama, and wrote again for my hometown paper, the Atmore Advance, small, twice a week paper, 1 page-ish for sports. I learned a little bit of everything. But during that time, I was home during the summer. I got a call from the athletic department that said that they had some student assistant positions open starting that fall, to work in the athletic communications office, and would I be interested? And I was like, sure. So I got in my car and drove up the campus one day during the summer, and did an interview and came back, and they offered me the student assistant job, and I started that fall, which was the start of my sophomore year. Well, that just happened to be the fall of 1992. And if anybody knows anything about college football, it was a transformative year. It's the first year of the SEC championship game. Alabama went undefeated in the regular season, went on to beat Florida in the national champion. I'm sorry, in the SEC championship game in Birmingham. Went on to play for the national championship in the Sugar Bowl in Miami, number one Miami with Gino Torretta, Heisman Trophy winner. The U versus number two Alabama. And I got to be on the field for the sidelines for that game. The last 8 minutes of that game, I got to be on the sideline. I was in the press box during the game. And it was just at that moment, I realized that this is something that I wanted to do. I didn't know everything about it. I'd only spent a semester working in the athletic communications office and done a little this and done a little that, but not a whole lot. And that opportunity just really hit me on that day, January 1st, 1993. And I said, you know what? I want to do this as a profession. And I really started pouring into it as an undergrad and got some opportunities there to work with a bunch of sports, including women's soccer. We brought it back as a varsity sport my senior year, and I was the primary communications contact. I did a media guide. I traveled with the team. And that really put me in position with some volunteer opportunities with the SEC and with the SEC not only for their conference tournaments, but when they were hosting an NCAA regional in Birmingham in '95, I volunteered to help out with that and learned about their internship program. I knew people that had done it and or the person that was in it before me or currently in it at the time. And I was like, hey, I want to try to get this internship. So I applied and somehow, some way, they called me in for an interview and I got that internship. And that was truly the start of this whole thing. That my what I thought was going to be 1 year at the SEC turned out to be 5 years. And that foundational time at the SEC office put me in position literally to be where I am right now.
So baptism by fire, basically.
Absolutely.
I mean, if there's a game to be at that makes any kid be like, I think sports might be it for me, it may or may not be that 1992-93 national championship. I
Without a doubt.
mean, any national championship game is going to do it, but I mean, it was a hell of a game to be a part of. Hell of a season to be a part of.
Hell of a season. We crushed Miami. Alabama had 10 of their 11 starting players on defense get drafted. I mean, we just had an unbelievable game. It's iconic game, Langham walking the guy down, Lamar Thomas, and just all the stuff that happened at that game. And it's just, I'm sorry, George Teague. I said Langham. Langham had the interception in the other game, but it's just unbelievable. And the fact that I was able to leave Alabama and just go from Tuscaloosa to Birmingham for my what I thought was going to be 1 year in an internship, but it changed very quickly. You talk about baptism by fire. I'll give you the quick story because it's a story that I've told a lot of times, and it still astonishes me to this day. So I started as an intern in the summer of '95. Fast forward to March of '96. I'm doing my internship duties in all the different things. I work our SEC women's basketball tournament. I work our SEC tournament. Well, prior to that, sometime in February, our assistant director had announced that he was leaving to take another job and he was going to work through the SEC men's basketball tournament. So, it wasn't a surprise or anything like that. Well, that Monday, we're all back in the office doing, our work. And, it's the Monday after selection Sunday and SEC men's basketball championship game. And I'm doing my work. And next thing I know, my phone rings at my desk and it's Roy Kramer, the commissioner. He's like, I need to meet you in the conference room. And I was like, this is not good. If he's calling
Oh,
me at 10 o'clock in the morning to say he needs to talk to me in the office in the conference room, after all this, I was not feeling very good about. I was like, what did I was going through my head literally, like, what did I do wrong? Did I say something? Did I do something? Was I whatever? So I get in the conference room and says a few words. He said, you've done a great job as an intern. Our assistant director Glenn has left, and we want to offer you the job. And I was like, what? He was like, we want to offer you the job as assistant director of media relations at the Southeastern Conference. I was like, when? He's like, right now. And I was like, okay. And he was like, you're now the assistant director of media relations for the Southeastern Conference. Go do the job.
wow.
I had no idea how to do the job. I had to jump in doing women's basketball. And oh, by the way, keep doing all my internship work because they wasn't hiring a new intern in March. So I had to be the assistant director and the intern at the same time. I was less than a year out of college, so I'm 23. And, he's like, by the way, you need to do all that work before Tuesday or Wednesday because you got to go to Georgia because they're hosting first, second rounds, and you're going there as our rep. Okay, commish. I got up to walk out. He said, oh, by the way, You got to write your own press release to say you got promoted. Yes, sir. And I end up going, and here I am. From that point, what, 3 weeks later, I'm in Charlotte for the women's Final Four, '96 women's Final Four in Charlotte, with Georgia and Andy Landers and Tennessee and Pat Summitt. They both win their semifinal game. It's an all SEC championship game. Here I am. Now, granted, I'm the conference person, but I'm as close as anybody at that point. I'm the conference communications person for SEC women's basketball, and it's an all SEC championship game with a legendary coach on one side and a legendary coach on the other side. And here I am there representing the conference and doing the job. And I wasn't even a year out of college.
Oh my
So
goodness.
you talking about baptism by fire. I absolutely had to do that. And somehow, some way I didn't screw it up too bad. And I went through the next year as assistant director and worked with women's basketball and got better at it and learned more about everything that goes on with women's basketball. And that summer, um, one of our coworkers, who was the associate director, she moved into a job in championship. So her position as the associate director of men's basketball came open. So I ended up taking our job. Oh, by the way, that full year I did women's basketball. Tennessee won the national championship again in women's basketball. And then the summer of '97, I moved over to men's basketball. So the '97-'98 season. And oh, by the way, Kentucky men won the national championship that year. So my first 3 years of full time, now granted, I was at the conference office, not at the school, but the sport that I worked with primarily, the team won the national championship. So
So, do you pick them good or are you the good luck charm?
I thought I was the good luck charm, and there's a side story that we won't get into that I tried to play that up all those years ago. It almost cost me, but it was the baptism by fire. I mean, that the first 3 years of my career, I was put in positions long before, well before I was ready for them. But I somehow, some way, I just, I took on the challenge. I tried to learn from the people around me. I tried not to make too many mistakes. I tried to just put my head down and do my job and do it well and be good to people so they be good to me. And it worked itself out. I ended up doing men's basketball for 3 years. So I ended up there 5 years total. And it was during my time at the SEC office is when I started volunteering. What turned out to be my last year at the SEC office was the first time I was able to volunteer to help out at the Goodyear Cotton Bowl Classic, because I had gotten connected. Well, the Cotton Bowl Classic at the time, I got connected to my predecessor and mentor, Charlie Fisk, and that went on a 21-year journey of volunteering through. I had moved jobs and changed jobs, but every year I came back and volunteered, and I just kept coming back and kept coming back. And 21 years into it, Charlie decided to step back into more of a part-time role. This was 2020, and there was mutual interest at the time. And, I went from not knowing what I was going to be doing at that moment at a job to having a Zoom interview, because it was 2020, it was COVID, it was June. So we didn't really know what was going to happen going on, but, I was one of those odd people that changed jobs in the middle of COVID. And ended up moving from New Orleans to the Dallas Fort Worth area, and I've been here ever since. And now I've got 5 games under my belt on staff, and 26 all time. I've been involved with this bowl game half my life. I'm 52 years old. Do that math. So
That is that is crazy.
that is unbelievable how life will get you involved in something. I never thought that this would be something that I would be connected to for so many years, and now it's become the place where I'm doing, having my career at this point. And, I look forward to a long time here. It's a unique place. It's a great place. We work around a bunch of great people, and we do so much great stuff here in the North Texas community beyond the bowl game. And that, energizes me and keeps me excited. Obviously, the game is so exciting. Our game last year was unbelievable. A
Yeah.
semifinal with Ohio State and Texas. But such a great time. I'm very blessed to be where I am in this stage of my career in college athletics.
I want to go back to something you said because a lot of the people who watch this podcast are on the younger end. They are starting their careers. They're maybe making their first transition. You said that you had all these opportunities that you weren't quite ready for. And I don't know, is that humble or is that humility? Or were you really not ready for them? Because I think somewhere in our heads, we're always like, yeah, I could do that job. And then you're like, oh crap, now I actually have to do it. Like, I mean, obviously you impress someone or some people along the way enough for Alabama athletics to call you, right? And then, for the SEC to not only bring you in as an intern, but then matriculate you right into that assistant director job before your internship was even over. I mean, you're obviously doing something right, but talk more about that.
Yeah, maybe it's a little humble, and I had to be, don't get don't get twisted. I had to have some level of skill. I had to have some understanding. And what I've tried to do my entire career is look at what other people are doing in the same space that you are and try to not emulate that or copy it, but be at that level. Be at that level of work, be at that level of information, be at that level of connectivity for the people that you work with. Because if I can match at that level, then I'm going to be taken at that level. When I moved into the men's basketball job, there were people, and really when I came to the SEC, there were people across that league, and especially when you talk about the more higher profile sports, men's and women's basketball, football, these people had been in the business a really long time, and I had to match them where they were. And I wasn't ready to match them where they were, but I had to figure out how to do that. And I had to do that through some trials, some tribulations, I didn't do everything perfect, but as I made mistakes, I tried to learn from those mistakes. As I got out and around in the profession more, I listened to what other people were doing. I saw what they were doing, and I was like, oh, I like this, and I like that, and I like this. So I'm gonna do a little bit of this, and I'm gonna do a little bit of that, and I'm gonna take a little bit from here, and I'm gonna take a little bit from there. And all of that just continued to help me define myself and redefine myself as a professional in the business. The biggest thing I learned along the way, you, young, not so old or old, you got to learn how to be a professional pretty quickly. Bigger than that, you got to learn how to be an adult. And I think the biggest thing is that when you get out there in that world and you start having to deal with the things that it is to be a professional and be an adult, once you embrace the things that you need to do that, then you can be successful in any job or any challenge or any opportunity that comes your way. And that's exactly what I felt like I did, and I was doing it a lot of times, this year has obviously been reflective, and I know we're going to talk about that probably a little bit. But I did it a lot of times when I looked around, there wasn't a lot of people that looked like me that was doing what I was doing. But that didn't stop me. That was not something that held me back because I was around, always around good people. Always good people was willing to help me, was willing to pull me off to the side and say, hey, you know what? You're doing a great job. But by the way, you might need to do this and this better. Or, you know, you know what? You didn't do a great job there. And I get it. You didn't know. So let me tell you a couple things that might be able to help you. I think a lot of times I just had to figure it out. I literally just had to figure it out. I had things that was thrusted upon me when I was at the SEC office. I'll give you a perfect example. We added softball as a sport. No idea about softball. No clue. And I had to learn softball as a collegiate sport, whether how to stat it, what to do with it, what to talk about it, all the different things. And, I was at the conference office and we had our first SEC softball tournament in Columbus, Georgia. We were at the stadium and the stadium wasn't even done almost there. And you walked in and doors wasn't on, it wasn't painted. I mean, it was literally they were finishing the stadium up as we were coming in there to have this first softball tournament. And it was unbelievable. And I had to jump in on a number of different sports while I was there. Women's soccer was a sport that I got to do when I was at Alabama. But I also, during my time as a student, I swimming and track and tennis and all those things that I helped out with. But I've spent a career being around a bunch of sports that I didn't really know a lot. Basketball and football is a lot easier because I was a basketball football fan. I watched a lot of it. I knew about it. It's not hard. But once you got into the business of the sports and the politics of the sports and the
Mhm.
people within the sport, I had a lot of things. I had to go to the tournament in, the year after I got an internship, I went as the assistant media coordinator for the SEC women's basketball tournament. Well, that was at 23. Well, at 24, I went as the media coordinator because I was the assistant director. So the intern reported to me. So, and I had to deal with difficult situations, whether it was coaches or media. Um, and I just had to learn how to do it. And some of it, I just made it up. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you that I had to figure it out. I just made it up. What I knew versus what I think should be done. I put that together and decided that's what I'm doing. And many times it worked. Sometimes it didn't. And the many times that it did work, I kept saying, okay, that worked. So, but I could tweak it and I can do it better here and I can change it there and I can make it better here. But I can tell you right now, there's probably things that I do right now today in 2025 that I probably started doing in 95, 96, nuanced little things that I probably still do to this day because I found out that's how I work. That's how it works for me. That's how I can be successful. And if it ain't broke, I'm not gonna fix it. And I'm just gonna
Yeah.
keep moving along the way. And I would tell young people, you know, this may sound a little harsh, but sometimes young people think they know everything. Well, let me tell you something. You don't know everything. You don't know everything, and you need to be willing to be receptive to learning from others. You have to be receptive to get information from others, watch what other people are doing, and bring that in. You might have a lot of skills. You might have can do things. I mean, some young people in this business right now, they might be better at graphics and better on social media and can be adept at a bunch of different things, how to manipulate, whether it's doing things on their phone or on the computer using whatever application, using AI. And that's great. But I can write better than you. I can be more
Mhm.
strategic than you. I can see the bigger picture that you can't see. So that's why a lot of great people in this business, if they're doing it really well, they have a very diverse staff. They got young people, they got old people, they got people that knows the traditional, they got people that know the more modern, and they can put that together in a way that gives them an overall communication strategy that they can execute so they can meet the needs of all the different constituents that they're trying to talk to um, across whatever platform they're trying to talk to.
Well, and I think you made a really good point there that seeing things from a 30,000 foot view or from a very different perspective, be it in title or just exposure or experience or expertise, whatever, it's so much bigger than just everyone looks and thinks like me. Right. And I feel like it's really hard, especially today with algorithms that tell you what you want to see or exactly opposite of that, so that you're arguing and keep coming back, that you can go out there and say, oh, everyone does this or everyone does that. And it's like, let's be real. In college athletics, in sports, in business, in anything, I would say I could count on maybe both hands, maybe a foot, the number of individual entities that have a very, very specific target market, or not even target market, but market, right?
Mm.
There is no world where every person who is going to go to a football game is on TikTok. Not the case, right? There is not a scenario where every single person is going to watch the evening news. But you know who's watching the evening news? It's the donor who has multi-million dollars now to generate back to you because their career is over, they're in whatever, right? And I'm making some generalizations there, but the point comes to, I would even take it a step further to what you said of young people thinking they know everything. Old people think nobody knows everything, right? And I think where it comes down to is a mutual respect, right? I will die on this hill I will not do TikTok. Zero interest, zero anything. I mean, I'll still die on the hill, but if someone like told me I had to, I guess I would figure it out. But I'm not consuming on TikTok, right? But I have a ton of respect for people who are doing it,
Hmm.
right? I'm also not watching the evening news, but I have a ton of respect for anyone who does. I have nothing against anyone who watches the evening news or reads the newspaper, whether digital or print. So I think it comes down to that respect for other people's knowledge and expertise and just experience in years or in, so I mean, we could be a foot wide and a mile deep, or we could do a mile wide and a foot deep, right? There's a bunch of different people who have different levels of experience, exposure, everything. And I think that that's a big piece that everyone that's working right now needs to understand. Like you can be a professional because you're literally being paid for what you do, but being professional is very different. Those are two different things.
Absolutely. Well, I've taken this, I call it the bullseye concept when it comes to communications in the world of college athletics. And it's very simple to me. Y'all know what a bullseye is. Think about all the constituent groups that you have out there: fans, alumni, which are two different sets of people. They overlap, but they can be different based upon your
Mm-hmm.
school, your conference, whatever. You got parents, you got prospective student athletes, you got media, you got young people, you got old people. So you got all these different constituent groups. And yes, at times you need to try to target certain people because you're trying to get a message across to those. But generally speaking, your messaging should be trying to hit in the middle. Because if you hit in the middle, you're going to touch on the most number of constituent groups.
Yeah.
Meaning everybody is going to get some piece of that message that you put out. How do you do that? You do that, to me, by syndicating your message. You syndicate your message by making sure you put it on the multiple platforms. For example, many brands have abandoned Facebook as a place to put out their message, which is awful communication strategy. Why? Because the late 20s to 50, 60 year olds are still, that is in many cases their primary social media platform. Now
Yeah.
they have moved over to Instagram to a certain extent.
Mhm.
They've moved to TikTok because maybe they had to, or they just find it whatever. But generally speaking, 20 years of social media that they have been involved with is based on Facebook. So they
Mhm.
will still go back there to get information or to communicate or to share information. So why do any brand do that? Makes no sense to me. And the other thing, by syndicating the message, and what I've been trying to do in the last few years when I in this role where I've had to be primary in our social media strategy, and we've done a decent job. We could do a better job. We've done a better job, but we could do an even better job. Is how do I syndicate that message so that the same thing that I put many times, the same thing we put on TikTok might be the same thing we put on Instagram, might be the same thing we put on um, X, Twitter. But what I want us to continue to try to evolve into is that take that same message and say it differently on that platform so that the people who are primary to the TikTok platform will digest it differently, but yet get the same message.
Yeah.
So, but you have to spend extra time to figure out how to say one message three different ways or four different ways. I think you can put the same message on X, Twitter, and Facebook, but you might want to be a little different on Instagram with reels and stories and TikTok. And then on LinkedIn, you could just put out your very corporate-y, you know, but don't fall asleep on LinkedIn because turns out everybody is young people and old people are on LinkedIn because people are looking for jobs or getting jobs or sharing their stuff about their job. So that's a different platform. So we've stepped into LinkedIn a lot more in the last 3-ish years, and it's been a good place for us to share our information. And we've been able to get it in a different place and a different platform Very simply, I'll use this as sports. When I go on LinkedIn to post something, normally if I post something about Alabama football, we're tagging the Alabama football account on every other platform. But on LinkedIn, I'm tagging the university because there is no football account. And even if
Right.
there is a football account, I'm still tagging the university. Why? Because there's tens more thousand people following the University of Alabama on LinkedIn than if they had an Alabama football LinkedIn. So I'm going to make sure that we tag the schools, the universities, and the conferences where it makes sense on those posts because that's a wider reach. And somebody who's not a sports fan may see this post about whatever it might be, and that is going to go a long way for us to help get our message out there to the casual or even the non-sports fan.
Right.
That's indicating your message in a different way. And I think that's what we've tried to do. And I don't try to make this overly complicated because if you just get your message consistent out in enough places, the goal is that everybody is going to see it. Wherever
Yep.
they see it, they're going to see it. And I think that's something you have to do. And to your point about the younger folks on that listen to this podcast, they need to understand that they are key to help syndicating that message. They can
Mhm.
help brands take the message to different places that maybe they haven't taken that messaging before. I'm talking about whether it's college athletics or name whatever corporation you want to name. I think that's really important. And if they can hone in on understanding how to do that as a part of a larger communication strategy, your ability to be impactful on the communications marketing side or any brand will be great and frankly will skyrocket you exponentially.
Yeah, anytime you can show the value that you are bringing personally or as a contributing member of a team, you're absolutely going to get that recognition. And I think too leaders are starting to realize that too. I only say starting to because I think there was a lull. There was a lull where we didn't trust this next generation, and now I think we're seeing. Actually, I think that the younger generation course corrected. I really think they did. I think they were tired of being called lazy and whatever. And I think they were like, timeout. We are not. Here, watch this. Right. And I
Right.
think it was like an enlightenment almost, like to be overly dramatic. But one thing that I love what you talked about is it's not just because a lot of college athletic programs specifically, and I'll use that just because we are talking here about college athletics in this moment, is a very siloed, segmented, right? You have your SIDs, you have your marketing team probably on the other end, ticket sales sits over there in a cave, whatever. It's the way it's always been done. It's been very few schools that have kind of moved out of that. We have some kind of changes with MMR companies who are taking over other pieces of it, maybe a little more collaborative, maybe a whole lot less collaborative. But I think the bottom line when it comes to college athletics, or, and again, to your point, any athletic organization, any business is sales, right? And everything that is sales is marketing, and everything that is marketing is communications in some way, shape, or form. So when you talk about all these times that you're tagging this on LinkedIn or this on TikTok and this messaging here and X and Y and Z, pun intended, what we're looking at from the marketing side of that, the general rule is they need at least 3 or 5 exposures to your brand before they even quote unquote see it with any meaningful eyes. So if I happen to be scrolling on LinkedIn and I see this about my alma mater, I won't say Alabama, but I'll use my actual alma mater, USF or whatever. And then I happen to see a billboard that maybe I never would have noticed, but oh, that's the new basketball coach. That means more to me because I saw it here.
Put them together.
Yep. And then this, and then that. And then all of a sudden I'm like, wow, I see USF everywhere, right? What am I missing out on? Right? If I'm the college, if I'm in the fan, I might see something that the school does when they become an AAU research institution, whatever. And I'm like, wow, I never would have seen that, but my head's in USF. Like, I don't know what it's called, but like when you are thinking about buying a new car and then all of a sudden that's all the only car you ever see on the road. It's a
Unbelievable.
it's the same concept. And that's exactly it, right? So the more that your team is doing the social, this on all the different platforms and uh, syndicating and amplifying that message and getting it out there, platform agnostic, but also platform targeted, the better marketing will be. The better marketing is, the more engaged people are with that, the better ticket sales will be. The better ticket sales are, the better attendance will be. The better attendance is, the better game pres, and on and on and on. And I think that that is so overlooked, or maybe not overlooked, but to your point about the 30,000 foot view, maybe we see things that you don't at the 15 or the 10. And I kind of look at that as career, right? You take the plane ride and then all of a sudden you're up in the sky. Maybe it's a rocket ship, I don't know.
Yeah.
But that goes back to that. And so when these younger people or older people are getting this feedback, constructive, passive aggressive, or otherwise, to take that to heart, maybe don't lose the forest for the trees, right? Wonder where that other person is coming from. And I think in general, that understanding, asking questions, even it's not because I said so. It's like, okay, well, help me understand, And then have you ever asked that to someone who's like, absolutely not, go figure it out for yourself?
Mhm.
No, no one wants to say that to you. So I think it all comes full circle, and I think it, really, really speaks to everybody's ability to be in the same room as each other and push forward toward that same goal.
Absolutely. I got taught a great lesson in my career during my time at CSTV. When I was in that role, I was an account manager. The first time I really stepped out of true communications. And I was an account manager. For those that might remember, CSTV was one of the leading website platform companies out there. Before Sidearm became Sidearm, Sidearm was actually at the second tier. CSTV was fighting with Exos and New Lion. They had a bunch of different names over the years. So part of my job is I had my region and I had my clients, and my job was to go out and get school, either sign new schools to bring their website to us to build for them for their athletic department, or to help maximize what they were doing. This was for me, this was, 2005 to 2008. So this was the early stages of streaming on, CSTV had the all access platform, which is, the legacy of that is what's happening on Sidearm right now on their platform. And learning about e-commerce, selling things like advertising on your website, an online store, online auctions, all these things that people were doing because it was just at that point you're talking 15 years, 10 years prior to that, 10 to 12 years prior to that people first started having websites for
Yeah.
athletic departments. So this
If
was the kind
Facebook was around for a year,
yeah.
you didn't even have uh video on Facebook yet.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember signing up on Facebook in 2008.
Yeah.
I absolutely remember when I signed up for the first time because you didn't have to have a school account and all that stuff. So, but what I learned through that process is two things. One, I learned that I was not good at selling stuff to people when money was involved, meaning signing contracts and all that. That was not something that was overly comfortable to me because it was about the money and it wasn't about it. It was about the relationship, but it was about the money because ultimately the money was the whole key piece to this thing. But what I did learn is that I was good at what I would call relationship sales, which is AKA communications, AKA media relations, where there's not necessarily a strict dollar amount tied to it, but dollars are being generated through the relationships that you have when you expose your brand and you can get media coverage or you can get exposure during social media. Because, oh, by the way, if you're really good at doing stuff on social media, now you can put out content and then you can sell that content. You can, or not sell the content, but you can market that content in a way in which it has an advertising. You can have, a piece of content that is a series, and you can make it presented by, fueled by, powered by, and you give to that company, hey, by the way, you were giving us $10,000 for all these assets that we have. Now we're going to put you on this series, and I'm using very small numbers. Well, that $10,000 sponsorship is now a $15,000 sponsorship.
Hmm.
That's at a very, very small level, but when you do that in major ways, those dollars get bigger, that gap gets bigger, and you can do the things that you want to do. And I learned for myself that I didn't, being a salesman was not who I am, but I do know how to sell when it comes to selling uh, the message, selling a point, trying to get coverage, trying to get people to talk about the topic that I want them to talk about. Because ultimately, again, if I get them to talk about the topic, talk about the brand becomes more valuable, and then that means the brand can be used. That value that goes up can be used to leverage to make money in other ways. And I think that was a really important lesson for me in my career. I had struggled through how I had to struggle through, and I did okay. I wasn't terrible. I wasn't great. I wasn't terrible. But I remember, and I'm not gonna say the school. I remember one of my greatest accomplishments was I had a school that was up for renewal, and I wanted to renew them, for multi-year deal. And normally we would go in and do a presentation and bring all these people and all this, that, and the other. And the person I was working with there is like, I really don't want all that. So you know what he and I did? We went and sat down at a table. We put us a beverage in front of us and we had a conversation. And instead of going through all that process, I used the relationship I had with him and the knowledge I had in him to iron out a deal. And we were able to renew that school without all the pomp and circumstance of a presentation and all that stuff and people flying in and all those things. We were able to get that done because I was able to leverage the relationship and I was able to sell through relationship and not just sell because we were going to put a bigger number on the bottom line that was bigger than the number they had before. Yes, the number got bigger, but I learned at that point I can use I use my skills with managing relationships to make things happen just as well as I can to bring the power of what we needed to do to actually sell somebody. So I would tell people all the time. Sometimes in our business, college athletics communication SIDs, people say, "Well, you SID types, y'all don't make money." Well, actually, they do make money.
Yeah.
It's just not as direct as what marketing does, as what development does. But if they do a great job of getting your brand out there and getting your brand coverage, they put value to that brand. So they do make money, sometimes in a direct way, but many times in an indirect way.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that's a great lesson to learn. And I think that it's really important for people to figure out the same way you would say, oh, it's as you're learning your management style, learn just as much from managers you don't like as managers you do. It's super important to know what you not only are not good at or things you just don't want to do. Like there are things I don't want to do accounting. I
Yeah,
don't want to do bookkeeping. My sister and my best friend are a bookkeeper and an accountant respectively. They know it very well. They hate me for it because I'm like, do my books. But it's
exactly.
could I figure it out? Yeah, of course I could figure it out. Do I want to? Absolutely not. And so it's really important at every stage, right? And it's also okay to change your mind at some point. Oh, I thought I wanted to do this. Now I don't. Now I'm gonna go do that. Okay, cool. Like
Yep.
it's exciting that you've been able to be in the sports industry for 30 years, even though you have had like those little mini pivots, and also pivots can be 1 degree, not 87. It doesn't have to be crazy. But when you talked before about, you volunteered and you've been involved with the Cotton Bowl for over or about half your life, which is a crazy thing to think about. Forget number of years, just to think you've done anything for more than half your life other than breathe is always impressive. But talk about how important it is to find, because obviously if you're volunteering, you're doing it out of the goodness of your heart, right? Or whatever else. But talk about how like that, how important that is, I think.
This business of sports, it becomes a very family centric style of relationship you have with people. Because if you work in sports and you've worked in sports a really long time, if you go through the evolutions of sports, at times you're spending more time around some of these people than you are family, than you are friends. because of the games you're working, the championships you're working, you are working a lot. So when that happens, what ends up happening is that, okay, I have to work a lot and I have to run these events. So in order for me to have fun doing this, I'm going to bring my friends, my family, my friends to come work for me for these games, this championship, so that we can have some fun doing it. And I get to see them and they get to see me and we get to work together and have some fun doing it. This past year, I went and worked first and second rounds out in Denver for the Mountain West Conference. I volunteered to do that. I didn't need to go do that. I could have easily sat at home that weekend, but I decided that I wanted to take 5 days out of my life to go out to Denver and help friends who work at that conference. And then ultimately, I got to interact with people I know at the schools that were assigned to that first and second round site and other people who were working that site. I went and did that because it was fun, because at this stage in my career, especially when I can go help out in an event and volunteer and I'm not in charge and I only
Mm,
have to do this much and I don't have to do the whole thing. It really, I enjoy that because I know how to help the people who are in charge and fill the gaps, do my job, do it well, stay in my lane. Don't try to act like you're in charge. I don't want to be in charge. It's
right.
your event. It's not mine. My job is to make you look good. So I get to, but it helps me to have that perspective. So when I have to step back into the role to be in charge, I know what I'm looking for in the people I want to have help out. And, I know what I need to do for them so that they feel like they feel valued in coming to help out. I have several great friends in this business. I have to use one because I use him a lot. My great friend Jason Frine, who's now the deputy director of athletics at UMBC, University of Maryland, Baltimore County. I met him in 1997 on Bourbon Street at the COSADA convention. Randomly, just on the street in the middle of the day in the group. And now he's become one of my best friends in life. And we work the Final Four together. We worked the CFP National Championship together. We worked World Series together and so many other events together because we are able to go work these events and we're good friends. So it makes it even more fun when we can go work these games and work these events together. And, I have a ton of friends like that. And it's a lot of fun. And I used NCAA tournament time, March, as a great time because for me, in a lot of ways, working for the bowl game, we have people come in and help us out, and that's from January into from late December into January, especially now that we're under the 12-team playoff. I mean, our game was on January 10th this year. By the way, the game was on my birthday. So turns out for you young folks that are listening, holidays mean nothing in sports. Mostly it means that you're going to be working. Our game this coming year, our 90th Classic, which is a quarterfinal game, is on New Year's Eve. What do you think we're going to be doing when the clock strikes 12? Probably in the middle of ending press conferences and making sure stuff is going up on the website and social content is going out. Oh, yeah, by the way, it's going to be New Year and people are going to be celebrating, having fun. We're going to be working our butts off at midnight when the clock strikes 12 going into 2026. But that's okay. But when you're around and you got to work on your birthday and you got to work on a holiday and you got to work on whatever, um, or you got to work for a week or you got to work for 20 some odd days straight, you got people around you. And, when they come in and help out for our bowl game, many times some of those people are at schools or conferences and they're hosting events. NCAA basketball is a perfect example. That's a great time for me to say, hey, you know what? You came and helped me. Now I'm gonna go back and help you. So we just help each other out because we know the plight, we know the struggle, we know how hard it is to run an event. And if you can bring in 3, 5, 10 good people that you know to come help you, and they're your lieutenants, and they can really do the job. gonna make my job a lot easier. So then
Yeah,
how can I go make their job a lot easier? So that's how you do, because that's how you get through this thing. We're not trying to work harder, we're trying to work smarter. And I
totally.
think it's a lot of fun to have your friends and people that you know around, and not only young folks. I got to give you one story, and it's I'm gonna try not to tear up because it's pretty. So there's this young student. Her name is Han. She's a student at Houston. She's graduating on Friday. I met her a couple of years ago when Houston hosted the Final Four, and she was one of the runners I oversee with my friend Jason J. Fine. Um, we oversee the duplication area at the men's Final Four. She was one of the runners. Young, energetic, young person about the business. She's in school, and she was just so excited. She stayed in touch. She wanted to get involved. She got involved helping out with Big 12 baseball, and I think she did basketball. Well, she came and helped out at the Final Four this year in San Antonio. She helped out in our media operations side, helped out in our area. Well, we get to the end, and she hands me an envelope, and she hands Jay Fine an envelope. We open up the envelope, and there's a sticky note on there, and I don't have the note in front of me, but it basically says, "Meeting you changed my life. Thank you so much," and all this stuff. And she gave us an invitation to her graduation
Oh my God.
with a picture of her with her Houston stuff on, and she's going on to go to graduate school at Columbia, New York City, in the sports management program. She had a picture of her holding her Columbia pennant. And
Yeah.
she hands that to me, and she hands that to Jay. And I look at him and I'm like, for all the moaning and groaning we talk about with some of the stuff and some of the long hours and some of the things we do, getting that invitation with that note on it says it all.
Yeah.
Because I was able to interact with this young person couple, three times in person, not for a long period of time. It's not like I talked to her every day, but we interacted through a sporting event. I encouraged her. I gave her information. I told her to keep in touch. She sent some messages. I sent, "Hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm doing this internship last summer, all this stuff." But for her to take time to send me a message and say, "Meeting you changed my life," because we were able to volunteer. She was passing out stats at a basketball game. Granted, it's the Final Four. I totally get it.
Yeah.
But in essence, I'm running copies and she's passing out stats at a basketball game.
Right.
And through that connection and keeping in touch, now she's going on to the next stage of her life, and continue to get her education to put herself in position to be someone with a career in sports. And I'm gonna be rooting her on, and I'm gonna be keeping in touch, and I'm gonna get her connected to as many people as I know up in the New York City area to help her continue along the way. But I use that example now because it is such a strong example of, you want to know why you want to do this? Because that's the type of impact you want to have on somebody. Young, old, it doesn't matter. This just happened to be a situation. But when you can invoke that type of spirit from somebody for working in sports,
Yeah.
I know I'm doing the right thing.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. It's it's so refreshing to hear those stories. I think that it means so much, and to be 30 years in and still not just be like, oh, great, another note, like another thank you note. Like, it's nice to see that it still matters, right? That it doesn't get old, and you know, that those interactions are important, right? And to anyone out there who's saying, oh, if I'm not getting paid, I'm not going to do it, volunteering is a great opportunity to get brought into that circle, right? To meet that person on Bourbon Street by chance or whatever. Oh, you're wearing the same conference badge or whatever.
Exactly what happened.
Hi, I'm so and so. Nice to meet you. I mean, yeah, it's such an important piece that I think, the expectations have changed so much over the past few years. Certainly since COVID, and just the way, even more of an advent of social media, of how we interact with people. Everything's got to be at the tip of your fingers. Like, being in person is so inconvenient for me. Like, it's really important to just those little things, the humanity of it, the relationship piece to circle back to what you said earlier is just super important. And listen, I would love to keep talking to you, but I know we are at time now. We're gonna have to do volume two with Scottie because there are just too many conversation points, and we didn't even have. I have a whole page of notes we didn't even touch on, just in case. I told you it wouldn't happen.
Well, look, we've known each other for some time now, and this business has been uh, very good to me. I've had some trials, some tribulations, I've laughed, cried, all the things. But for the most part, I can't, you know, being an athlete was never going to be the thing for me, unfortunately. As much as inside of me to be able to play, I'd give it all up to be able to play at some level. I, baseball probably would have been the sport, but I would have been if I could have played anything. But that was never going to be my way in the world of sports. But then I got introduced to the opportunity, and I just been able to piece together, a lot of fun, a lot of stories, um, a lot of great memories, and tons and tons and tons of great people that have been good to me, and hopefully I've been good to them over the years. And we've done some amazing things, some things that had never happened before, whether it was at an event or whatever the case may be. And I'm glad to know that I still got a little bit left in the tank, probably a lot of bit left in the tank. So I'm not at the end. As I use my horse racing analogy, I can see the fourth turn. I've maybe passed the third turn. I'm not at the fourth turn yet. Not there yet. Not hitting the backstretch yet, but I can see it. And but I still got a lot of race to run. So I'm excited for what's next and the next several years of doing this, and hopefully continue to can have fun. It's sports, y'all. We work in sports. We have to have fun.
Yeah.
Period. If you're not having fun working in sports, get out today.
Yeah, you're doing something wrong.
You're doing something wrong. And have fun, and have more interactions, and just be good to people, and just enjoy. But thank you for having me on. I love being able to talk, and we definitely need to do a volume two so I can get to those notes.
I know, yeah, volume two coming soon for sure. For now though, thank you so much for being on. This has been always fun. Always fun. How could it not be? But this has been Bright Ideas. I'm Jess Duemig. This is Scottie Rodgers. Thank you for tuning in.